Hello and welcome to our first ever hand review. I'm going to review a situation that I ran into a couple of weeks ago. And I know that by the time that you get through two of these, because they're going to be the first two that we review, you're going to say to yourself, oh, well, it just looks like John has all the worst luck in the world. Well, I think in this first hand we're going to decide whether or not I made my own bad and dumb luck, or whether I made the right decision. Looking back, it's been 3 weeks now since this hand happened, and the stack sizes are approximate, but let's go through this a little bit first. These are worth 10 in this situation. These are worth 50. These are worth 100. So my starting stack for this hand was 770. The guy to my left, his starting stack was over 800. He had me covered. That's really all that matters in this situation. And the third player that's going to be involved in this hand has a stack of about 330. So she's behind the two of us. The blinds at this point are 20-40. That doesn't sound like much, but we started out at 1 and 2. So we're pretty deep into this tournament when this particular thing happens. So I'm going to run you through it step by step. And then when it's over, you can tell me if it's bad luck, if it was played correctly, because there is a moment in this hand where I'm really not sure. So when I start the hand, small blind is in for 20, big blind is in for 40, guy next to me folds. There are 8 people at the table. So with 8 people at the table, 3 people down, there are 4 people left to act after me. I'm sort of mid-position, sort of. I look down at that. Ace, king of spades. So with 4 people after me, ideally what I'd like to do is narrow it down to 1 or 2 players and see the flop for not too expensive of a price, but also not too cheap, because I kind of want to make profit on this hand. So I raise it up to 220. Reasonable enough. If you have a good enough hand, you're going to call that, right? That makes sense. From this position here, this guy, I'm not going to show you his cards yet, he looks at what I've done. Now he has, to start this, he has everybody covered at the table. He is the big stack. And he thinks about it for a second before he says, I'm going to have to move all in. So he shoves all his chips in. Somebody says something next to him, and he says, no, I'll show it. That tells me one thing. He does not have aces. Now keep that in mind. He does not have aces. So we're going to swing over to this person. The person next to him is a woman who says, you know what? I really wish you hadn't have done that. I wish you hadn't have gone all in. She thinks about it for a second. Now, she knows he has him covered, but she decides to move all in. And she has to also think about it. So now I'm stuck with a decision. I'm looking at 2 all-ins right now. Everyone else folds. Blinds are in. So the pot right now, it's 770 plus 330 plus 40 plus 20 plus my 220. It's somewhere in the vicinity of like 1,200 or something like that. And what do I have left? 2, 3, 4, 50, 5, 50. My SPR is less than like a half at this point. SPR is stack to pot ratio. Basically, I put 220 into a pot that has now swelled to over 1,200. Now, what do I have again? Well, let's go over this again. Ace, king of spades. This is not an easy hand to fold, and I'm going to tell you why it's not. I don't think that the guy over here has an ace. If he would have had an ace, he would have snapped all in. All-ined. I don't know if that's a verb, but he would have snapped it. For sure he would have snapped it. But he didn't. He thought about it. Then he kind of felt a little bit like guilty about doing it. Followed by her, who really wished that he hadn't gone all in, which tells me she doesn't have aces. Now, that being said, they both have hands, and I don't have a made hand. What I have is ace-king. However, ace-king suited, I think I can catch these guys. I think I might be able to catch these guys. That's my thought process, so I call. So here's what we're looking at now. There's my cards. Let's swing on over and see what the guy who has the big stack has. Queens. So, I was right. He had queens. I wasn't right about what he had, but I was right that he didn't have aces. And sure enough, jacks. So, at this point, I have about 8 outs. And that's really it, unless I get some spades or something. But one of the spades is gone, so one of my outs is gone. So, I'm hanging in there, and we go 1. And I'm like, woo! At this point, it seems like my gamble has paid off, except there's a queen. Now, we're looking at 3 queens. I'm in trouble. Here comes a 5. I need runner to win this hand. And that's really the best I can do. Except that the next card is not what I put in there. Oh, that's because it's supposed to be down. Maybe if I did this right. The next card is the queen. Yeah. Point being, 4 queens. 4 queens, yeah. And then there comes another spade. It's kind of useless. I didn't sweat it out. By the time the 4th queen hit, I had already made it halfway out the door as he took out 2 people with queens. Now, simple question for you here. Would you have done the same thing? Would you have called the all-in and another all-in with ace-king suited? I'm not sure. I ran Flopzilla on this, and for the price, considering what I had left and considering what I had already invested and considering what my SPR was, it seems like the right decision would have been to go all in if you took the aces out of the equation. Now, I have an ace, so I'm fairly confident that I have a blocker there. I have a king, so I'm fairly confident that's a blocker also. Blockers being cards that take away from their possibility of holdings. They could have the other 2 kings. They could have the other 2 aces. But I'm going to bet on them not having them simply because I've narrowed down the range of hands that they have. So I've narrowed it down to probably a pretty decent to large pair, and what I thought was something more like 7s or 8s from the woman, who turned out to show up with jacks, which really didn't factor into the hand at all. When it came down to it, she had the worst of the holdings by the time the hand was over, but, you know, the only one that matters is number 1, and number 1 got quad queens. So my question is, did I do it right? Would you have folded ace-king? I thought about it. It hit me right before I called. A little feeling inside my gut that trumps almost everything that has to do with books and knowledge and studying and everything else and mathematics that said, John, I think maybe you should fold this. So I thought about it, like, with my thought in my head. The other side of my brain was like, why would you fold this? Everything checks out. And it said, I just don't, something feels wrong. And I said, well, the math checks out. The past history of everybody folding checks out, so your out should be there, because throughout the night, and I forgot to mention this, people were calling down large-sized bets with aces, not like pair of aces, like any ace, like ace 4, ace 3, ace 5. They'd show up at the showdown with an ace and a weak kicker. So with everybody folding to what I thought was a pretty small-sized bet on my part, I thought, my aces should be in there. Again, though, the outs, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of outs there for me. I have 3 aces and 3 kings that can help me, and some spades, but one of them is gone if I can get, 3 spades to show up. 2 of them did, but wouldn't have mattered against quad queens. So, is it just bad luck, or did I make my own bad luck? Now, later on in this video series, when I start showing you more quads that beat me, because it happened again, you'll come to find out that I tend to make my own bad luck. I made a much worse decision later on when I lost to quad 7s, but this decision I kind of feel good about. I think it was the right one. I think everything checks out. I think the price was right. I think my logic was right. It turns out it was, because the queens and the jacks were not aces or kings. So I think my thought process was correct, and the result just is. And the one thing about poker that is very, very difficult to get stuck in there is, did you do it right? If you throw in jacks and someone beats you with king jack, what else were you supposed to do? In the long run, if you play correctly, things will work out for you. You will be a plus player. And if you play like me, and you play 7-5 suited out of position, yeah, you'll win a hand and knock somebody out of a tournament. But in the long run, you won't fare as well. Have a good night, everybody. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this hand.